Okay, we have a mimer from Shabbos Parshas Vayera, Chof Mar Cheshvan Tavshin Mem Gimel, and that mimer is the same. Was said on the same kviyas, like this year, where Shabbos Parshas Vayera, if I remember correctly, this Shabbos, upcoming Shabbos, is Chof Cheshvan. Hashem Paked Sara Kasher Amar, and Hashem remembered Sara, as he said. Vayas Hashem LaSara Kasher Diber. And Hashem did for Sarah as he spoke, which means he gave her a child. The Maimer is actually going to explain what are these two things, Pakad and Vayas. Maybe I'll say Baal Yom HaYoledes, and the one whose birthday is on Mar Cheshvan, meaning Chof Mar Cheshvan. In other words, the Rebbe Shabbat's birthday is this week. Says in his well-known Maimer on this pasuk, that just recently, just now, it was published. In other words, in Tavshin Mem Gimel 1982, this mimer was published in Sefer HaMarim Tafresh Mem Daled Gufnun Hey, on that page 155 in Sefer HaMarim of Tafresh Mem Daled. So the Rebbe Rashab explains over there, Masha Amar Azal B'Gemara, what the Chazal said in the Gemara, Nemar Pkida B'Isha. It uses the term Pkida, remembering, when it comes to a wife, to a woman, like it says, Hashem Pakad Sarah, like it says, Hashem remembered Sarah. And it says, remembering when it comes to the land, like it says, and you remembered the land, and you gave her the drink, you satiated her, you watered her. What does it mean, this remembrance in a woman? That is the idea of pregnancy, that she becomes pregnant with a child. And the idea that Hashem remembered the land is, like we said, you made a drink, that's the idea of rain coming down. That's one thing that it says. Another thing it says, we use the term birth by a woman, and it says the term birth with the land. It's just like in the land. Through the rain. These are rains of blessing. There is the growth and there's the blessing. Like it says, I will give you the rains in its time, and the earth will give forth its produce. So just like rain is something that gives birth, in other words, there is a creation, there's something that's created and grows from it. So to by woman, first it's the remembrance, or the conception, and afterwards is the birth. That's what it says at the beginning of the pasuk, that Hashem remembered Sarah, and like he said, that first half of the pasuk goes on the pregnancy, goes on conception. And then the second half of the pasuk, Vayas Hashem l'Sara kasher diber, and Hashem made and did for Sarah like he spoke. The koyal later is referring to birth. Like it both says in Medrash, and it's also brought down in Pirush Rashi on the Torah. The Maimer explains Hashaychus the Isha la'aretz, the connection between, why is there this association and this comparison between a woman and the earth. And we say that the earth and the woman both have this idea of Pekida, and both have the idea of Leda. So he says, because we find that the Chazal put these two together in general, in the way a person, or how it comes about. According to what the Chazal say, children, that's like the Pekida of Isha. Chai, life, umezoyne, which is sustenance. Sustenance comes from the ground, from the growing things. Lav b'schus talia milsa is not dependent upon merit. Ella b'mazla talia milsa, it's dependent upon a mazel. As we're soon explain what that means, the mazel and etc. The Inyan banu p'kidas isha, the idea, the first part of that phrase that Chazal is referring to, children, that's the conception, that's the remembrance of a woman. The idea of sustenance of Kiddush Haaretz is the remembrance of the earth, so like it says, that the earth, from it you will extract bread, through rain. Both of them are dependent upon mazel. Okay, so that's the common denominator between them. Now the Rebbe is going to explore, bring from the Maimer the Rebbe Rashab to explore what is the meaning of that Maimer Chazal in general. What does it mean? It's dependent upon a mazel. The Chazal said it's not dependent upon merit, but it's dependent upon mazel. The Maimer over there, the Rebbe Rashab asks, the Chazal said that Yidden do not have a mazel, an astrological sign, etc. The Yisrael lo yesh mazel klal. Yidden don't have mazel whatsoever. They're independent of any astrological signs, which is the simple meaning of mazolos. Mazolos refer to the different mazolos lamaila, mazel sarton, there's mazel gedi, there's the different astrological signs are known, called mazolos. Since it says in one place that Yidden are not dependent on the astrological signs, what does it mean that they are dependent upon mazel? And the Rebbe is going to go on to explain that the difference is whether you're talking about the level of the mazolas that are part of Seder Ishtalshlus, as what we just now called them, the astrological signs. That's something that Yidden are not dependent on. That's something that only the Ummas Ha'olam, the non-Jews, have a shaykhus with. Yidden, their connection is to a level that is higher than the astrological signs and the mazolas. And that level that is higher is called Ein Mazel Yisrael. The Maimer explains over there, the Mashamru Ein Mazel Yisrael. What the Chazal meant when they said there is no mazel for the Yidden could be read differently. That the Ein or the Ayin is the mazel Yisrael. Not that they have no mazel whatsoever, but that the Ayin becomes their mazel instead of the astrological sign of the sheep or the crab or whatever it is over there. The mazel of a Yid is the level of ayin that's beyond Seder Ishtalshlus. Ein could be read as ayin is the mazel liyisrael. And ayin is higher than Seder Ishtalshlus. Just like the world was created yesh me ayin. So he's going to explain what's the definition of this word ayin. Hainu, what does this mean, the word ayin? Shalagabe atachten, ayin hu b'chinas mitzias nimtza. The ayin is called ayin because in comparison to that which is down here below, it is not an existing existence. Why is it called ayin? Not because it doesn't exist. It's because it doesn't exist in our form of existence. And since it doesn't exist in our form of existence, we are a sensory type of being. When we perceive something, we try to perceive something within our existence with the five senses, with touch, with taste, with smell, with sight, with hearing. Since it's not existing in the physical world in this type of manner, therefore, by the one below cannot grasp it, physically grasp it, he cannot intellectually grasp it or understand it because it completely surpasses our level of existence. On this level, the level that's completely beyond our perceptions, completely beyond the world's existence, this is what the Chazal meant when they said that children, life, and sustenance are dependent upon the mazel. Hainu b'mazel hanal, the ayin shalamayla meseder ishtalshlus is dependent upon this mazel of the ayin that's higher than the Shein order of descent. That from that level, the ayin, that's higher than the Seder Ishtalshlus, comes down all the blessings for Yidden, with children, with life and sustenance. Then the Rebbe goes on to connect it with a Maimer, the Rebbe Marash. According to this, we can also explain. A Maimer of the Rebbe Marash, the year when this Maimer was said in Tavshin Mem Gimel was 100 years since the Rebbe Marash's passing. The Rebbe Marash passed away in Tavshin Mem Gimel, 1882, 1883. Making a living these days, in the times of Mikvus and the Mashiach and the heels of Mashiach, is similar to man, which is called bread from heaven. Bread from heaven is not something that is logical, it's not something that we can perceive, it's not something that we can understand, it's completely miraculous. We don't do anything in the physical realm to plant, and to sow, and to harvest, to be able to bring about it, bread from heaven. And even once it comes down, it has so many miraculous characteristics. As much as you collect, you'll only have enough for an omer, and it doesn't last for more than a day, it disappears the next day, etc., etc. So it's completely out of this world. It's not something that's really tangible in our world. So in the similar vein, just like man is something that's completely out of this world, so the Rebbe Marash said that these days Parnasa is out of this world as well. Since Parnasa is from those things that are dependent upon the mazel, and the level of the mazel, of the level of mazel which is ein mazel Yisrael, that the ayin is the mazel Yisrael, is bechinas lechem and hashemayim, is a level of bread from heaven. El Shirat HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'inyan ha'parnasa yum shechai dei slapshus ma'aseh adam. But in the end, there's a little bit of a difference between man and us making a living. Hashem wanted that, despite the fact that parnasa is really a level of the ayin is the source of parnasa. So really, if the ayin is the source of parnasa, it's completely intangible, and it's really something that we cannot truly affect and create, etc. So therefore, why do we have to go to work? So that's because Hashem wanted it that way. He wanted that we should work for the parnasa to come down. He wanted to become mislabish in the mice of the person. But in truth, b'mazla talya mills, it's dependent upon a mazel. Just like in the simple sense, b'mazla talya milsa means, it means that if a person has a mazel, then he has a good mazel, he will have parnasa, whatever he does. And if he doesn't have a good mazel, so then regardless of what he puts into it, he'll never be able to make it. But here we're talking about in a more spiritual way, that we need to do our action. We need to do our avodah. And together with that, I will be emes with mazel talya milsa, but in truth it's dependent upon the mazel, which that mazel b'chinas ayin shalomayim miseder ishtalshlus. The mazel is the ayin that's higher than the chain order of the center. Shalachein, the Rebbe says a very interesting thing. The Rebbe is always looking to bring out the positive of something, because it's dependent upon the ayin that's higher than the Seder Ishtalshlus. The difference between Seder Ishtalshlus and Ishtalshlus is, in Seder Ishtalshlus, everything is limited. Everything has a quid pro quo, everything has as much as you do, that's how much you get, and everything is defined. There's oidus, there's kelim, limitations. But when you're dealing with a level that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, higher than the Seder Ishtalshlus is unlimited. Being that it's unlimited, could be that I could do a little and get a lot. And not only that, but being that it's unlimited, it can be without boundaries whatsoever. Therefore, Parnasa comes down also very broad, very great, despite what I may or may have not done, both whether it is what I've done physically in the world. I may have done something very minor and still, boom, all of a sudden the parnasa like blows up. Or also even spiritually, I may not have done anything like over the top, but the parnasa blows up in a great way. Why is the parnasa blow up in a great way? Because since it's coming from the ayin, and the ayin is higher than Seder Ishtalshalos, and higher than Seder Ishtalshalos has no limitations, therefore, we as well, in the manifestation of the physical parnasa, also have it in a way of without limitations. Whereas if parnasa would have been dependent upon what I do down here, whether we're talking about what I do down here with a schus, my merits, or we're talking about the physical doing down here, that it's whatever work I'm doing, that is what's earning me the parnasa. So since a person is limited, so both his chusim are limited, and his work, his physical work is limited, so therefore the resulting parnasa would also be limited. But we see that parnasa can often come in a way that breaks through all barriers. Last paragraph on the first page. From the lengthy matters that he expressed over there in that Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab. It's understood also those matters that are dependent upon and mazel. B'mazla Talia, gam heim nimshachim und spiegeln sich ab bei der Avodas Adam L'Kaina. Also, they are drawn down and are reflected through the avoid of a person to his maker. In other words, even though mazel is ayin, it's higher than say the Vishtalshlos, and it's not really about our avodah. But despite not being right about our avodah, when we do an avodah that is similar to the idea of what the ayin is, so then we make ourselves more of a receptacle for this type of level. So the Rebbe explains what is that type of avodah. We could say the avodah the avodah that draws down the level of mazel is the avodah of doing things with all your might, as we know that Chassidus says ma'oid, as in toiv ma'oid. Toiv means good. That's a limited good. Toiv ma'oid means very good without any boundaries. So the ava and the avodah b'chol ma'odecha means going completely out of boundaries. And when one goes out of their own boundaries, this taps into the level that's higher than say the Ishtalshlos, that's also completely beyond boundaries. With all your heart and with all your soul has limitations and boundaries. Even when the avodah is with all the powers of the soul and all the details in it, that's the meaning of B'chol Avavcha. You're serving him with your heart. You're serving him with your emotions. B'chol Nafshcha, Chassidus explains, not just with your emotions, but all the powers of your soul. Koilol, including Gam Ha'iskalus, the Koich Nefesh, also the inclusion and the intermingling of the soul powers. B'yud Beis Givulei Alachs and Chulu. Chassidus Kabbalah speaks about how the different soul powers connect with each other in different diagonal lines. When you have the right line, the left line, and the middle line, and you divide over there the koiches hanefesh, so there's 12 possible joints, diagonal lines. Chesed and Tiferes, Gvura and Tiferes, Chesed and Yesoid, Gvura and Yesoid, Netzach and Tiferes, etc., etc. So there's 12 different diagonal boundaries, it's called. This is the source for the 12 Shvatim and the source for the 12 months, etc. So even when I have these 12 different types of joints that cause an intermingling, but even then, we know in general intermingling shows that he's going out of his boundaries. He's not just Chesed, he's not just Gvura, like we have by Avraham Avinu. Ata yadaiti ki that when Avraham Avinu went out of his service to Hashem, that he served Hashem only with the mitzvah chesed, with his achnasas orchim, etc., and then he was ready to sacrifice Yitzchak, which involved the idea of Gvura, so then we knew he had a true iskalus of koiches hanefesh, and Hashem could tell him, Ati yadaiti ki and now I know that you also have fear of Hashem, you're not just a one-trick pony, you only can serve Hashem in the middle of Chesed, you can't serve the Eibishter in the middle of Gvura. But even when I have Chesed and Gvura and Tiferes, which again, these also indicate a certain amount of leaving limitations, but it's not yet entirely that. Also, this is still considered a service, even when I'm having B'chol Nafshecha, all the powers of the soul, it's still in the way of being measured and having boundaries. The avodah is beyond measure and boundary. The avodah the B'chol Meidecha, it's the avodah with all your might. And this avodah with all your might affects the drawing down. That's higher than Seder Ishtalshlos. This is what Chazal said in Mesechtes Brachos. They said, top of the next page, the Davka Parsha Rishonim Shel Krishma, only in the first Parsha of Krishma Yisrael Imchinas Oisin Ritzayin Shel Makim. Yidden are called fulfilling the will of the Creator. Chazal say, what's the difference between the first parsha of Krishma and the second parsha of Krishma? So they say, Kan, meaning the first parsha is Ba'oisin Ritzayin Shel Makim, and Kan, B'she'ein Oisin Ritzayin Shel Makim. They are not fulfilling the will of the Creator. Simply put, the first parsha is talking about the mitzvahs, it's talking about Limud HaTorah, talking about mezuzah, it's talking about tefillin, it's talking about Avos Hashem, it's talking about Achdus Hashem. The second parsha is saying, if you will listen, such and such. If you won't listen, so then Chas v'Shalom the opposite. So it's talking also about not fulfilling the will of Hashem. Chassidus explains a deeper idea. It says, Oisin Ritzayin Shel Makim. They do or they make the will of the Creator. What's it mean they do or make the will of the Creator? What's that concept mean? Making, it should say, hey, mekaimim, they fulfill. What does it mean, making? So it says, the second line on the second page, the hefresh being parsha rishoyin or parsha shniegu. The difference between the first parsha in Krishma to the second parsha in Krishma is, parsha rishoyin ha'imrim b'chol meidecha. In the first parsha, it says, with all your might. But in the second parsha, it doesn't say. It only says, b'chol avavchem, b'chol nafshem. It doesn't say, b'chol meidechem. Ubezeh oimrim shehem oisim ritzayin shel makim. Because it says, b'chol meidecha. Therefore, it's called, the Chazal say, they refer to it, that they are making the will of the Eibishter. What's it mean, they are making the will of the Eibishter? They are creating a new will. Will, Ratzon, has to do with higher than Seder Ishtalshlos, just like the Ayin has to do with higher than Seder Ishtalshlos. So Ratzon as well is higher than Seder Ishtalshlos. Hainu Shaidei avoided b'chol meidecha, through the avodah with all your might. Oisim Ratzon Chodesh l'maylam Seder Ishtalshlos. They make a new will that's higher than Seder Ishtalshlos. So that's why only the Parsha Rishonim, it says, is Oisim Ritzayin Shel Makim, because only the Parsha Rishonim is the person who's going out of his boundaries and out of his limitations, and therefore they make a new will. Oisim Ritzayin. Just like the level of B'chol Meidecha, its source is in the person's own mazel. Just like we say that there's the mazolos above, and there's the ayin that's a mazel Yisrael. Within each one of us, we, as soon as we bring a Maimer Chazal, we have our own mazel. That each one of us, our private mazel, that is the essence of the neshama. And to do the work of B'chol Meidecha, one needs to tap into that mazel of the neshama. Ha'ayin sheba neshama, which can also be called the ayin level of the neshama, just like there's the ayin of the Eibishter, which is the ein mazel Yisrael. So to the neshama, there's the level that's incomprehensible, etc., which is the ayin of the neshama. The Rebbe explains the parentheses, Hainu ikar v'etzma neshama, that's the primary, the core, and the essence of the nefesh. And now, often when we talk about the mazel of the neshama, that's something removed. But it doesn't have to be that way. Vihi pay elas ala guf. Well, we do the avodah b'chol meidecha we are drawing down from the mazel of the neshama, and it affects and impacts the body. Where do we see the effect and the impact on the body? So we know from where we see in general that there's such an idea of the mazel of the neshama, that it says that the people that were sort of standing around Daniel, that when Daniel had a vision, they were trembling. And the Chazal say, why were they trembling? Since their mazel of their neshama saw it, therefore a great trembling fell upon them in their bodies down here below. So we see that the mazel, even though it's the level of the neshama, the way it's connected above, it's the primary part of the neshama, it's not even the part of the neshama that's really enclosed in the body. What's enclosed in the body is only a ray of the neshama, not the mazel, not the ikar, not the etzem, but still in all it impacts the body, as in the case over there with the people around Daniel. And we even see this idea that the mazel impacts the person from the very meaning of the word mazel. And that's why mazel is from the expression, and it pours out from Levanon, it runs out of Levanon. It runs and it's drawn down and it flows and it becomes received down here below. So just like by the person's individual mazel, that the person's individual mazel will affect his avodah, and this is the source where a person has the avodah b'chol meidecha. In a similar vein, so too in what's being drawn down from above. That this is what comes about through our avodah, through the avodah b'chol meidecha, through the avodah of our mazel of our neshama, of the ayin of our neshama. So we draw down and we connect with the mazel of the ayin of above. We draw down a new will that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus. And this level we draw down here below into the world. Like it's hinted in the expression, the will of the makim. So the Rebbe explains something very interesting. Why do we use the term over here? There's many terms that Chazal would use for the Eibishter. Why is it specifically used this term, Ritzoyne Shel Makim? Why do we call him the place? So first we have to go down. What is the idea of place? We have to explain what's the idea of place. Why we call the Eibishter the place? So we're soon going to make reference to it because the world is not his place, but he is the place of the world. The description that we call Hashem Makim is referring to such a level that becomes enclosed in the definitions and the paradigm of place. To such a degree does place relate to this level of Elokus. We're dealing with such a level of Elokus that we need to forewarn and make sure that you don't mistakenly think that the Eibishter is in the place of the world, but it's the other way around. He is the place of the world, not the world is not his place. So the very fact that you even need to say such a thing, that means we're dealing with a level of Elokus that has to do with the world. So that's what we're saying. We are drawing down from this level that's a Ratzah Chodesh, that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus, something that's completely beyond everything. But we're drawing it down to be in a level that's connecting with the world. Until it comes down to the literal idea of Makim. Until it affects bracha in all matters in the physical sense. Children, life, and sustenance in a comfortable way. A lot of times, Chas V'Shalom Parnasa can be difficult. So he says, that the Parnasa should be comfortable. The Rebbe a lot of times will add to it, and we'll have it here in this Maimer as well. Doesn't just mean that Parnasa should be comfortable, but all of them should be comfortable.